Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Trio podcast. My name is Hayder and I'm your host as usual today. Today I'm delighted to be joined by a football writer, particularly in French football, and a podcaster, Jeremy Smith. Jeremy's featured in The Guardian Sport, Talk Sport 2, Get French Football News, numerous outlets, and it's an absolute honor to have him on the podcast to discuss some French rumors, because I know there's a lot being sort of thrown around in the media. So Jeremy, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thanks a lot for having me on.
No problem at all. And look, it's crazy time, isn't it, at the moment? Are you busy with just lots of transfer rumors, or is it starting to die down a little bit as the season starts?
No, I don't. Especially, all summers, even as the season starts, as long as the window's open, it's always a bit crazy. But obviously, with everything that's gone on the last 6 months and this summer, I think it's even worse. I mean, the French window's staying open till mid-October or something. So.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
There's a while to go, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a while. How come it's staying open longer than the British window?
I don't entirely understand how it works, but I think a window can only be open for so long. And in France, they opened it earlier in the summer because their season had finished. Then they actually closed it for a few weeks and then reopened it, I guess, to kind of tally at least a little bit with the rest of Europe.
Very, very interesting. I'm not really a fan of the transfer window. I prefer the football. I just want to see what's going on back on the pitch. Analysis, sort of match day. That's much more my cup of tea. But obviously, as you run a podcast, the Premier League podcast, you have to talk about silly season. So let's just jump straight into it. And let's start with Edouard Mendy, because he is someone, obviously, that's been heavily linked to Chelsea. I believe they are pretty close to getting him signed on, pretty imminently, I reckon. And what have you heard in terms of the deal, in terms of the fee, and what sort of player are Chelsea getting? Because as you probably know, everyone knows, Kepa is pretty awful. He's someone that needs to be replaced. Expensive buy, but Chelsea are doing some excellent business. Is Mendy the keeper to take them to that next level?
It's hard to say because he's sort of, although he's not young, he's kind of relatively new on the scene. He had a fantastic season a couple of seasons back at Reims, and sort of and a transfer to Rennes, who obviously is kind of a step up from Reims, and basically maintained his form last year. So I think he's talked about how he was a sort of late developer and very, very nearly missed the boat in terms of a professional career. So I think he sees, any success that he has as a bonus, but obviously a chance to join a sort of top level Champions League club, even if he's not necessarily going to be the number one keeper, at least to start with. He basically went to Rennes and said, look, I want this move, please give it to me. And while it puts them in a little bit of a bind in terms of having to find a replacement, they're a decent club. They're not going to stop him having that opportunity.
Absolutely. And what's his best attributes? Because when you look at him as a goalkeeper, obviously he's very tall, isn't he? He's about 6'5". Yeah. Premier League's a demanding league in terms of the high ball. You see a lot of keepers come in, and that's got to be your bread and butter. You've got to command your box very, very, strongly. You've got to have a presence there. Is that something he holds in?
Yeah, real presence, real sort of, I guess, control and understanding with his defense. Great shot stopper. Possibly the distribution side is where maybe he's slightly weaker. But certainly for the last two seasons, he's definitely been amongst the top two or three in Ligue 1. To be honest, arguably he was outshone last year by the guy who replaced him at Reims, which is Rajkovic, and I'm surprised there haven't been any Premier League clubs sort of going after him, to be honest.
Very interesting. And this one's going to happen, isn't it, with Mendy? You expect him to be a Chelsea player before the end of the window?
It looks like it. He clearly wants to go. It looked like terms are agreed, and actually in the press conference sort of an hour ago for the upcoming Rennes match, Stefan was asked about the fact that he and Niang weren't in training today, and he sort of skirted around the issue. But I think it's clear that certainly in the case of Mendy, it's because of this imminent move.
Let's touch on Niang quickly because I know we spoke about it off air, and he's someone that was at Watford, I believe, wasn't he, a few years back, and he had quite a good loan spell there. He's someone who I'm surprised hasn't had a better career. I know he was at Milan and he did well there, and he was very highly rated, but he seems to be someone who somewhat of a journeyman, I would say, bounced from club to club, obviously a talent. I mean, what is it with Niang that's made him have that sort of trajectory in his career from, bouncing from clubs? And do you expect any Premier League clubs to have a look at him this summer?
I think they could do, because he certainly fits the profile of I think he's got all the tools to succeed in the Premier League. He's relatively versatile, play down the centre or on the flanks. He's tall, he's strong, he's fast. I think he sort of sprung onto the scene very, very young, I think, at Caen. And has moved around a lot, hasn't settled. I get the impression it's as much off-field things as on-field. Things like, I think he's got into scrapes with the French under-21s. He's been in a couple of sort of controversial late-night car crashes, things like that. But he certainly seems to have settled in the last couple of years. He scored, I think it's 23 maybe over the 2 seasons, Ligue 1 goals for Rennes, which isn't the most stunning set of figures, but I guess just it's showing more consistency than he's ever shown before. He's bedded down, and I think the only thing I would say is that there's constant rumours that he doesn't get on with the coach at Rennes, and last week he missed their friendly against Benfica, and apparently it was because he didn't turn up to training. So I guess you can look at it both ways. Either he's still got a bad attitude, or it's because he's pushing for a move. So I'd expect Premier League clubs to look at him. I saw that Brighton had been linked, and to be honest, as a Brighton fan, in terms of the pure footballing ability, I'm keen, but in terms of the potential off-field stuff, I'm not. I'm a little bit wary.
Yeah, it's not just about ability, is it? These days, you got to have a good head on you, and sometimes it's like Balotelli, isn't it? Is the risk worth it? Probably not. But let's move on to a few of the Lyon players, because there's some excellent crop of players there coming through, and as everyone saw, they got to the semi-finals of the Champions League, which is very impressive. And let's start with, well, I'll mention all of them and I'll let you go for each one. So there's obviously Memphis Depay, who's apparently agreed personal terms with Barcelona. Depay is someone that obviously I know very well as a United fan, and came to United. It was a case of too much too soon, I think. He was definitely excellent at PSV Eindhoven. He excellent free kick taker. He had fantastic numbers. I believe it was 17 goals that season before he joined, but it just never worked out for him. I don't think he took to the pressure very well. United are a very unsettled side, so he's gone to Lyon and he's really made something out of his career. He's been brilliant for them, and also for the national team. He's been excellent, playing more up front, which is quite interesting. And then you've got Aouar as well, who for me I think is a wonderful player. I think whoever gets him this summer, whether it's City, Juventus, or Arsenal, hope it's not Arsenal, but whoever does get him is going to get a fantastic creative player. How high can he go, and do you expect him to move? And then Musa Dembele is someone that was obviously heavily linked with Manchester United and Chelsea in January. The fee was quite high. I believe I remember it was about £70 million, or was it euros, one of the two. But it doesn't look like he'll move this summer. Do you expect any movement to come in the next couple of windows with Dembele?
I think that there's definitely going to be movement at some point, and it might yet be this window. Juninho this week said that he definitely doesn't see all 3 of them leaving in this window, but they've all got a sort of reasonable case if you want to leave. Depay has only got a year left on his contract. To be honest, despite him last week saying, "I've never said I wanted to leave," he's basically been saying he wants to leave the whole time he's been at Lyon. So I don't know how he's got the cheek to say that. His probably the same as at United, although Lyon's seen more of the best of him. He can still blow hot and cold, but when he's playing well, he really is a fantastic player, and can win matches on his own, which he has done a few times for Lyon. So although I don't necessarily think that he's I certainly don't think he's as good as he thinks he is, and I'm not sure he's sort of top 5 European club quality, which is what he always thought he was. The funny thing is, he always counted Barcelona as one of those top 5. And I guess at the moment it's fair to say that they're not. And so maybe now is the right timing to go to Barcelona. Obviously, he's got a good relationship with Koeman as well. Lyon have actually said that they don't necessarily want him to leave, and they'd even be happy for him to stay and sort of let him go next year for free. But if they get a decent monetary offer for him, that they will let him go. Aouar is a strange one because he's the one that everyone's been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years, but there doesn't seem to have been many sort of concrete offers come through. The only one that seems to have sort of filtered out is the Arsenal approach, which was with an element of a swap deal with Guendouzi, and Lyon said that Guendouzi doesn't fit their profile, the profile of player they want. I don't know if they mean, again, like position wise or personality wise.
Attitude, for sure. Attitude. He's got a terrible attitude. My brother's an Arsenal fan, and he's just desperate for him to get out. But there's not many takers, is there, for Guendouzi this summer?
No, I think he's been tainted by the attitude thing. I mean, PSG, that probably come to it later, but there was also a rumor about him being offered to PSG as a make way for Draxler. So clearly Arteta wants rid. But then the other day he played really well and actually captained the France under-21s. So I suppose if you got the right manager, and the current manager of the under-21s was his manager at Lorient beforehand. So, if he's kept in check, he's still a good player. But yeah, in terms of Aouar, I mean, as you said, he's a fantastic player. My issue with him is I'm still not sure he shows it consistently enough. He can raise his game for Man City or Juventus or whatever. And if Lyon are playing well, he plays well. But the way that people talk about him, I think he should be sort of more proactive. He should be making Lyon play well rather than the other way around, if you know what I mean. If he can do that, and obviously he's got the potential to do that, then I think he'll be one of the best midfielders in Europe. So the question is just where he's going. And City have always been linked just because Guardiola has often said he likes him, and I do think he'd fit into a City team. I think he'd do well under Arteta as well. But Lyon are just waiting for an offer to come in. And I think maybe because of this summer after COVID and the market, and no one knows exactly what's happening, maybe everyone's waiting for someone else to make a move or for one big signing to happen so everyone can sort of work out what the figures are, relative to that one. And then Dembele, he's a strange one because he's a very good goal scorer. He showed that coming off the bench against City in the Champions League. He's shown it already in Britain with Celtic and Fulham. I'm not sure he's a very good footballer. And so when he's not scoring goals, obviously that is his job, so fair enough. But he's not doing much to sort of connect play, to drop deep. And
would you argue he's like, sorry, Jeremy, I interrupted, but would you argue he's a bit like Icardi, great in the box, but the rest of his game is pretty much non-existent?
Yeah, I mean, they're not exactly the same in their style, but yeah, that's fair. I mean, you're not going to look at him to come up with too many assists, or Henry style pop up on the wing, dribble past a couple, and then slot it into the opposite corner or anything like that. So again, like I said, he's shown that he does fit the sort of Anglo style, and I think he would do very well here. But I do wonder if that's again what's holding some clubs back from putting in a concrete bid. That there's also been a few times, particularly this season, where if he's not scoring, he's not doing much else. And I think, I just read an interview with Henry today where he talked about changing the position of centre forward, and whether that was true or not, I think people do look to them to do a little bit more now than just be that fox in the box. And maybe that's the problem there.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. When I've watched Dembele, he's been good, but I just don't think with the money that's been quoted, he's worth that. One last question before we move on to a few other players is, when you talk about Aouar and sort of that blowing hot and cold, could you level that same sort of criticism towards Ndombele? Because when you watched him when he was at Lyon, we saw a few games where he was outstanding against City in the Champions League. But it seems, and I've spoken to a few people just regarding Ndombele's character, and the character sort of analysis has been from the feedback has been that he's someone who, if you're playing Barcelona 1 week, he'll turn up and he'll be incredible, but he can't motivate himself for those smaller games. Is that something that's true on Ndombele? And could you say something similar for Aouar, or is that a bit unfair?
To be fair, it's probably true of Lyon as a club for the last few years. They always seem to raise their games and then come unstuck against teams that you expect them to beat. So I think there's a sort of a little bit of cause and effect there. But yeah, I think it's a similar kind of thing. And Dembele, I think it's a mixture of a ridiculously laid-back attitude, which maybe sometimes goes too far into not caring, and there are, I think, occasional weight and fitness issues as well. So I think with him, it's a bit of a package. And if you're going to be someone like that, Mourinho probably isn't the best person to be playing under. And Spurs fans are probably not the most patient either. So, on reflection, maybe that wasn't a great move. Aouar, there's never been any question of bad attitude or anything like that. Although he's club vice captain, there aren't any sort of really obvious kind of strong leadership, strong personality traits from him that I can see. So I think it's slightly different. And I think it is just someone that, if the right coach can get him to just be on it. What I'm saying is I don't think he's sort of picking and choosing his matches, as in I can't really bother to lift myself for this one. I think it's just the way he is, that although he's been at the top level now for 3-4 years, I think he's still relatively young, relatively inexperienced, and possibly he hasn't yet reached his full maturity where he's going to be playing well week in, week out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a great assessment. And can we discount Juventus then with Aouar, with their financial situation?
They arguably, along with City, they've been the most strongly and consistently linked. So I'm not sure we can completely discount them, but Lyon are asking for 50 to 70 million. So unless they drop that figure, then possibly Juventus might be priced out.
Yeah, I agree with that. And let's move on to Guendouzi. I know you've touched on it, and we'll do Guendouzi with Draxler. Guendouzi's someone who, he came to Arsenal highly rated. I can't say I've been a massive fan of him. I think that he's shown flashes of ability, but I don't see the hype around him. Maybe you can, obviously you're a French football expert, you can perhaps tell the listeners more about his ability, but I've never seen him do anything outstanding. And he seems to think that he should be playing at a higher level than Arsenal. He thinks he should be going to play for the Barcelonas of the world, the Real Madrids of the world. Although, as you mentioned, Barcelona are pretty poor right now, so maybe he would get into their side. But look, he's someone that Arsenal potentially have a very good bargaining chip, especially in this market where they've got a young player with a high sell-on value. I think at the moment they could possibly ask for 40 million euros for him, possibly because he's young. There is potential there. Obviously, you mentioned Draxler. Is there any movement on a swap deal there, or is it a case of Draxler, obviously with Leeds' interest there, apparently he's turned them down? Can you see Draxler moving to Arsenal instead, or is it a case of him staying for that final year at PSG and then deciding where he goes after that?
It's funny that when the Draxler rumour came out, someone replied to me in a tweet saying something to the effect of, because Arsenal, are already short of flaky German attacking midfielders and an attitude problem. And I think maybe it sort of does come down to that a little bit with him. I feel slightly sorry for him during his time with PSG, that he's been sort of shifted around to so many different positions that he hasn't really been able to make any one position his own. But then I guess on the other side of it, you could say that if he played well enough to make one of those positions his own, then they wouldn't have kept shifting him around. I think, clearly PSG don't rate him highly enough to be making him a first-team regular or certainly starter. but he seems happy enough there. He said that he wants to see out his contract. I'm sure he's on a massive wage. It's a nice city to live in. I can understand that to a point. Although for me, it's always disappointing when a top class footballer does that. I mean, we're not going to talk about Bale, but I don't really understand his attitude.
Awful attitude.
Yeah. So I can't really see. I can't see the benefit, particularly to Arsenal or PSG, of this swap move. I mean, I do think Guendouzi has a lot of potential, but I don't think he's good enough for PSG or where PSG want to be. And Draxler, at his best, Arsenal, like a lot of teams, would benefit from him. But he hasn't been at his best for a good 3-4 years. And I'm not sure that Tete clearly is a good man manager, but I just think that they seem to be on a bit more of an upward curve. I just think, why risk unsettling it with someone like that? The funny thing is, I think with Guendouzi, and possibly that's why maybe in a way he's sort of more highly rated than his ability suggests, is that it's a fine line, but he's exactly what Arsenal have missed so often for so many years, that, someone in the centre who puts his foot in and looks like he cares and he's always giving 100%. The problem is that too often he gives 110%, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. They need a bit of bite in their midfield. They've always, Arsenal, been flaky, and I think Guendouzi's probably anything but flaky. I wouldn't say he's a flaky character. I think he's, you're right. Maybe
Draxler, sorry.
Oh, Draxler, yeah. Oh, you mean Draxler's?
No. I mean, Draxler's flaky.
Yeah, sorry, and Guendouzi, yeah. No, that is a good point. I mean, talk to me about Draxler's best position, because I mean, it's quite telling that Ander Herrera started ahead of him in the final. I mean, Herrera, for me, when I looked at him at United, he played deep a lot. Probably not his best position. When he was at Athletic Bilbao, he was a very good number 10, and I think that's something where United probably messed up. And Herrera played well, but for me, I don't consider him an offensive option. I'd say he's got the energy and midfield tenacity. So, I mean, where does Draxler play? I always assumed Draxler was more of an attacking mid rather than on the wings, but is that where he does play? Because Arsenal don't need any more wingers. Let's put it that way. They've got Aubameyang now, obviously re-signing. They've got Pepe. I'll ask you about your opinion as well on Pepe. What's your opinion on Pepe?
I rate him. I mean, I don't think he's worth 80 million euros, but I do rate him. It was a bit of a risk. He sort of had one stellar season, maybe 18 months. So it was, and then there's an element of risk bringing him in without sort of maybe giving him a little bit longer to see if, this wasn't just a flash in the pan. I do think he's a very talented footballer, and Arsenal fans seem sort of split, because there's some that will point to his stats and say, look, for a first season, that's actually not bad. And there's others who say he just hasn't been in matches enough. I think the position he's in, he probably does need to be given a little bit more time to adjust to English football. But the problem is, for 80 million, you expect that adjustment to be a lot quicker. And I don't think the fee did him any favours.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's a tough one. I think he's basically judged on that fee. You look at Harry Maguire as another player where, of course, he's not worth that money. There's too many deficiencies in his game to be worth that money. Crazy money spent on that. I just, I don't want to talk about it. But, Pepe is the same. He gets the same, I suppose, treatment because of his feet. Clearly a talent. He's got great feet. He can shoot as well. But it's difficult league to settle in. And yeah, my last question on Draxler was, what's his best position?
For me, attacking midfielder and sort of the centre of the pitch. I think at his best, he can sort of dictate games. He can pick a pass. He can dribble with the ball. He's got a good finish as well. The problem is, obviously, at PSG, he's got a lot of competition in that area. And there's only, so many attacking players that can be played. And that's at PSG, he's played everywhere, sort of front three, middle three, often as a holding midfielder, even though he can't tackle. And so I think to an extent he's been wasted, but I don't think he's made enough of his opportunities. But you look at, you mentioned Champions League. I mean, you look at the midfield that they played there, and apart from Verratti, who himself has got a few attitude problems, I think, it's actually a relatively I mean, for a club that wants to win the Champions League, for me, it's a pretty average midfield, and I think they do need a bit of a clear out and improvement.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more on that. I was quite surprising the difference in quality between Bayern's midfield and obviously PSG's midfield. But let me ask you about Soumare, because obviously he's someone, as you said off air, who gets linked pretty much every window to the Premier League. I know he's been linked to Chelsea before, to United. He's obviously someone that is highly rated, but I feel like Premier League fans have actually never seen him play. He's one of those players where everyone raves about him. And Soumare, yeah, we can have Soumare at Chelsea, we can have him at United, he'd be great next to... No one's seen him play, let's be honest. So are you able to just give a quick sort of review on what sort of player he is, and are there any concrete rumours or talks that he could be coming to the Premier League?
So there's two players like that. The other one is Sangare at Toulouse.
Yes.
Every time I mention him, there's all these people saying, sign Sangare. He's
because of
been
FIFA
pretty poor for about 18 months or so.
Absolutely.
Soumare, yeah, it's weird because when he's played, he's looked good. And again, sort of, he's tall, he's strong, he's mainly defensive midfielder, but could be box to box. He can bring the ball out himself. He's got a good pass. Everything is there for him to become a sort of, almost like a Vieira kind of player. And I guess that's why he's spoken about a lot. But actually, you look at his career so far, and he hasn't really played that much. A lot of substitute appearances for a couple of years. And then last year, he's played half the season. He started for Lille for the first half of the season, did look very good, and looked like he was sort of going to be, continuing up his learning curve. And then in January, he was kind of unceremoniously dropped. And by all accounts, it's more an off the field thing, because Lille agreed a fee for him to go to Newcastle and he turned it down. And then there was kind of a blame game. Well, your agent's been pushing the whole of Europe, touting you across the whole of Europe, and we make a deal for you and you don't want it. And then, so it seems like off-field issues that are more of a problem than on-field. But then again, sort of like Draxler, you could say, well, if he was playing so well that it was impossible to drop him, then we'd still see him in the team. But huge potential. But you're right, we haven't seen anywhere near enough of him to be able to say for certain that he is going to be that next great midfielder.
Absolutely. I'm so happy that you also agree with me, because I just hear it every time you see any sort of next French top talent coming out of Ligue and Soumare's there. And I honestly, has anyone seen him play? I mean, I've seen a few games and there's definitely potential there, but you got to think that if Newcastle are going in for him and none of the big clubs are as well, it's probably not, as you said, not an ability thing, but perhaps, is there a mentality problem or attitude problem, whatever's going on. But is he one that could realistically move this summer, or is it probably just going to be the same as most summers or most windows where there's just a lot of rumours flying around?
I think he definitely could. I mean, Lille are always up for selling someone to the Premier League, usually to Arsenal, and usually for a lot of money. And no smoke without fire. The fact that he's always linked, and Lille have never sort of denied that he's sellable if the right price comes in. It might be a question of how many other Lille players go, because obviously there's Gabriel, there's Maignan, the goalkeeper, might go, for example, as well. So I think it might depend who else goes. And they've got a few good midfielders now. So I wouldn't be surprised. But again, someone's got to put in a concrete bid that they like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you might see Arsenal, because like you said, Arsenal do like the track from Lille to Arsenal. But let's move on quickly. I know these two players have signed for Fulham now, but Areola and Tete. Do you think these are good signings for Fulham? You remember, obviously, when Fulham came up a few seasons ago and they went and spent so much money. They spent so much money on Seri. Remember, Seri was meant to go to Barcelona and that he didn't go because of that problem with the cold with his feet or something like that, I believe. And I don't know, some rumor like that. You might be able to clear that up. Move to Fulham was a disaster. Fulham went and spent nearly the third most in Europe that season and got relegated. So obviously they're going to be a bit more careful in how they approach their return to the Premier League. But are these two players that will enhance them next season?
They've both got a lot to prove, so potentially so. Tete, first of all, I'm not convinced, and I guess no one in Lyon's convinced. It's strange because he arrived with such great pedigree. Dutch international, obviously came through Ajax, who obviously got such a great reputation for developing players. But he's never really made it at Lyon, and has often sort of fallen second, third choice. And the fact that Raphael, for example, even though he divides Lyon supporters' opinion, was often chosen ahead of him. Then they brought in Léo Dubois, and even the fact that they sold Raphael this week. They sold, or sell, they didn't want to, but one of their talented youngsters who was sort of penciled in to be the next main right back. He's gone to Milan, and yet they're still willing to sell Tete as well. I think says that probably both sides have just said it's come to the end of the road here. And there is a talented player there. I think he does everything okay. I'm just not sure he does anything particularly well. So it's not, considering, as you said, this is sort of a very different policy to last time they went up. I think it sort of maybe fits in with what Fulham are trying to do. And again, the fact is he's a Dutch international. Clearly there's quality there. So if Scott Parkin can get anything like the best out of him, then it will probably turn into a good move. Areola also splits opinion, and I'm on the side that think he's a really good keeper. And
I agree.
I don't think he's done himself any favors staying at PSG so long, because I think they don't appreciate him. I don't think he's been treated well by the club, by the fans. I think this is his fifth loan. I really think he should be leaving, moving somewhere for good. But I do think he's a good keeper who, if he's given the confidence of the club and the fans that he's playing at, and gives himself a chance to settle somewhere, I think he could still become a top, one of the best. I'm shocked that I saw yesterday he was 27, and I probably would have guessed sort of still 23, 24. But yeah, I suppose with all these loan spells everywhere, I feel like he's frittering away his career, which is a stupid thing to say considering he's got a World Cup winners medal. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And also keepers have longevity, don't they, in their career? So, he's still got many years left. But I honestly thought someone like Chelsea would have looked at him. I've always thought he was a good keeper every time I've seen him play. I don't understand I suppose the negativity surrounding him, but I think it's a good signing, and he's definitely someone I'm considering for my fantasy team if he does start. But I know you've got to rush off in about 5 minutes, so let's try and cover these quickly. But talk to me about the situation at Marseille, because I know there's a few issues behind the scenes. Is there going to be many players that they need to sell? Because I believe there is financial problems there. They
haven't got any issues with the sort of financial overseer in France, so they're all right from that point of view. But they don't really have any money to buy anyone. And obviously this year they're in the Champions League as well. I think last year Villas-Boas did an amazing job. They were also relatively lucky they didn't have too many injuries or anything like that, except Thauvin was out injured all the season. So actually him coming back is almost like a new signing. But kind of challenging in Liga and Champions League this year, I think is going to be pretty tough for them. And I think they do need to strengthen. Villas-Boas came close to leaving in the summer. He's still talking in terms of wanting to bring players in. But I don't think they're going to be able to bring... they're making some canny moves and finding some good young players on loans or free transfers. But I think they do need to strengthen, and they won't do that until they sell. So Payet and Thauvin, probably the highest rated players, but they both adamant that they want to stay. Kamara, probably they could get a lot of money for, but he doesn't want to leave either. And the ones that it seems do want to go are Sanson and Lopez in the midfield. Personally, I've never particularly rated Lopez, but he looks like one who could move to Spain. And Sanson it sounds like he's desperate to move to the Premier League, and is always sort of linked with the likes of Everton. But again, no one's putting these moves in. But I'm sure Marseille would be very happy to bring in sort of 20, 30, 40 million for some of these players so they can go out and spend it.
Oh, I'm just wondering if Payet would go back to West Ham. Obviously, the way he left it. So, that one season, or that one particular season he was there in the Premier League, was one of the best I've seen from a player outside the top six. Absolutely phenomenal player, wonderful to watch. But interesting to see what happens there. Yeah, it seems like that's a lot. That's a theme with a lot of the players that come from the French league. But let's move on to the last one, Jeremy. And I really appreciate your time today. But Gabriel is obviously now an Arsenal player, someone who was chased by Napoli as well, potentially to replace Koulibaly. United's name was put into the mix. I just want to ask you, was that interest legit from Manchester United? And a lot of people are saying if United had made the move, then he would have joined United, but they just didn't put anything concrete into Lille. And what sort of player is he? Because I've watched a bit of him. I like what I see. He's obviously a good passer of the ball. He's quite composed. He's someone clearly that has excelled, I think, in the bigger games in the Champions League, although he did struggle against Chelsea. I believe Abraham turned him a few times. But is he going to be someone that's going to hit the ground running? And is he as highly rated as people say he is?
I like him a lot. I mean, again, he's another one who's only really had sort of 18 months or so at the top. But during those 18 months, he settled right into the Lille team and played brilliantly. He has said that he's benefited a lot from playing with the experience of Jose Font next to him. So I think, Arsenal might have a sort of decision to make. Do they think he still needs that experience and maybe put Luis next to him? Or do they think that him and Saliba can sort of both bed into the team together? But yeah, I think he's an excellent defender. As you described him, he's got pretty much all the attributes, including the temperament. He's still only sort of 22. I think he's quite young.
Yeah, he is.
Something about the way he sort of holds himself and plays that you sort of think of him as older. But I think he's, with him and Saliba, Arsenal have got the potential to have, a truly great centre-back pairing for the next sort of, 10 years or so, in theory. In terms of where he was going to go, Napoli and Everton were the ones that were linked the most often. Arsenal came in. United, I think it probably was genuine, although Lille, again, do seem good at generating these stories to kind of up the prices of their own players. So there might be an element of that. But it might also be sort of putting 2 and 2 and getting 5, because I think everything at one point seemed to turn on Koulibaly, and if he goes to United, then maybe Gabriel will go to Napoli to replace him. So there might have been a bit of that. But I think United probably just came in a little bit too late.
And their name just gets thrown around every summer, United linked to everyone, and that's a great way to drive up the price. But last one, I know you've got to go, Jeremy, but is Saliba the real deal, as everyone and all, especially Arsenal fans, are saying?
Again, it's hard to say just because he has so few professional matches under his belt. But the matches in which he's played, he has looked excellent. And, there's even been a marked difference in results when you look at matches where he's playing and where he isn't playing for Saint-Etienne. Last year, he had struggles with injuries, and Saint-Etienne had a particularly bad season. But again, everything he's shown, sort of physique, footballing ability, temperament, that he's so young and he's come in and already been, acted like a leader and is sort of, directing his 35-year-old captain and helping him to improve his game and that kind of thing. I think he is the real deal. But again, there's always going to be risk with bringing in a sort of 18, 19-year-old player, especially for that kind of money, moving him to another country when, he's barely moved out of home, or certainly out of his, youth development setup or whatever. There's so many other factors involved. As we said, some French players get to, maybe pick and choose their matches or develop attitude problems. Less so in recent years. It certainly used to be a problem. He doesn't seem to be one of those characters, but time will tell, I guess.
Absolutely. I think he looks a talent, and we'll see what happens. But Jeremy, honestly, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been completely brilliant, and I've just learned so much about the French league. And I'd love you to come back on again later on the season if you're up for it.
Whenever you like.
Absolutely. And just tell the listeners where they can find your work.
So I'm on Twitter at JeremySmith98. And then you'll usually find me podcasting either on Get French Football News or French Football Weekly.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll chuck Jeremy's @handle under. And to all the listeners, make sure you like and subscribe. We want to get this video out to as many fans as possible. It's such a great insight. And we'll see you next time.